Okay, so here we are. We are going to talk about iridology imaging equipment because this is a really important topic, really important. And as we talk about this, it's important because the quality of your photos is what has a huge impact on the quality of your iris assessment. If you have lousy equipment, and I'm using that phrase accurately, and because there's a lot of lousy equipment out there, it's going to affect the kind of assessment you can actually do. So I want you to stop and think for a moment, because I get asked the question a lot, what equipment do I need? What do I need to be able to do an iridology assessment well? And there we go. We've got audio all the way through, so this is good. And the answer, I want to put an analogy out there to make you consider what you need. I want you to stop and think for a minute. Let's pretend you've got a 2015 Chevy Cruze. Okay, so nice little car, runs well, but it started to make a funny noise. And so your neighbor has does mechanics works in his garage, and so you take it to him, and he's got wrenches and screwdrivers and pliers, and he might even have a spark plug thingy and some basic doodads, but he can't find the problem. And he can't find the problem because your Chevy Cruze 2015 has a lot of computer stuff in it. So you really do need to take it into the guy who's got the shop that has the computerized thing that they can plug in, and it does that online, that little assessment thing, and it tells them everything that's wrong that could possibly need to be repaired, but especially what's wrong that's making your car make the funny noise. Now, that analogy works really well because if you are wanting to be a professional iridologist, well, you're going to start with that basic toolkit. As you develop your skills and become professional, you want to make sure that you're using the right equipment for the job, that you're not doing some kind of a stopgap, that you're not doing well, this is all I can afford. And that may sound harsh, but I'll explain it in a minute. You want to make sure you're using equipment that will help you to get the best images so that you can do the best iris analysis. So it's really important that you have decent equipment that's fairly up to date, that's fairly high resolution, that's just got all the right stuff going for it. So we're going to look at what some of that equipment is right now. I'm going to pop my camera around for our friends who are on Instagram, and we're going to back that up. There you go. We'll be playing with the camera back and forth as we do this. So here we go. This is where I like my students to start. I always discourage them from spending hundreds or thousands of dollars when they are just starting out. I want my students to know they love iridology, and I want them to know they can integrate it well into their client sessions before they spend the big bucks. So all you really need to get started as an iridologist is a good white light, medical grade pen light, which is what we've got right here. This is a really old one, but it still works, and that's a good thing. And you need a good magnifying device. Now, this thing here is an old school jeweler's loupe. It's amazing, and you can still buy them even though this one is also 40 years old. You want to look for the Agfa brand, and you might see some on Amazon or whatever that say Agfa like, which I can't vouch for their quality, but it might be exactly what you need. This is an 8-power magnifying device. Now, when you're looking for a magnifying device, don't look for super, super high, right? Anything over about a 10 power is not going to serve you well. Anything that is that high is going to be hard to focus, to actually get your bearings of where you're looking at in the eye. So don't go higher than a 10 power. Now, these lighted magnifiers are also very useful. You can see it's got 2 little LED lights in here. This one actually has 3 interchangeable lenses, a 2x, a 3.5x, and a 10x. The one challenge that you'll find with a lighted magnifier is you cannot redirect where these lights are shining. So there ain't shining on hopefully the field that you're looking at, but you can't move them around independently of the magnifying device. So that is an important thing to be aware of, and we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. So I always suggest that my students have all three of these items, that they have a good white light pen light, that they have a good about 8 power magnifying device, and that they have a lighted magnifier that has interchangeable lenses, and they don't need anything higher than, this has a 10x, which is the upper limit. You're going to use, if you could get a 5x, get this set up with a 5x, maybe a 3x, a 5x, and a 10x, that would be just awesome, perfect. The combined total of all of this equipment is probably under 75 Canadian or about 60 US. So really important that you remember, this is not actually imaging equipment, right? This is not going to take a picture of what you're looking at. This is simply going to help you see what you're looking at better. And that's what we want initially, right? We want to just be able to see what we're looking at and see it more clearly. And we want to move light around, and we're going to talk about that again in just a few minutes. So these are images taken with a smartphone. And while you can sometimes get images that will do in a pinch, it is really hard to get consistently great iris photos with a smartphone. So I'll tell you why first, and then I'll share some tips with you to help you get better, although they won't be perfect images with your phone. If it's what you've got and you're working towards being a professional iridologist, it's a starting point, but please do not think that this is your finishing point. When we're working with a smartphone, the lens in the smartphone, neither lens in the smartphone, the forward-facing or the rear-facing, is designed for up-close photography or for keeping rounded surfaces in focus really well. So taking photos of a rounded surface close up is super challenging. And while you can get smartphones with cameras of up to 48 megapixels, like, oh my goodness, their lenses are not macro lenses. So even with that really high resolution, they cannot keep that rounded surface entirely in focus. Most smartphones that Joe Q average, like moi, have are 12 to 16 megapixels for the forward-facing camera. It's okay, but it's not great resolution. And you can see these images were taken with a smartphone, and you can see some of the challenges we've got. The image on, well, both of them have shadows. They have reflections from the room. They've got interesting things happening all over the place. This one's not really in focus. And so the other problem with a smartphone is that in order to get the eye picture, you have to be far enough away that you actually get a lot of face, which means that out of your entire image, less than a quarter of it is actually going to be eyeball. And so then you've got to crop that and blow it up, and you lose definition when you take a picture and you expand it. Unless it's super high resolution, you lose definition, and that's not great. So you can see with these images that it's not only hard to get it well focused, there's a lot of interference from the environment. We see a lot of light artifacts, we've got shading, we've got uneven lighting, and all of that makes it really difficult to do an accurate iris analysis. If that is your starting point, that's fine. As an aspiring or already professional iridologist, I encourage you to move beyond that and to be saving your money for a proper iridology setup. Now, here's that one of those photos again blown up. So here are tips for how to get better images with your smartphone. And again, better, not great. Number one, make sure there are no windows in the room, or try shooting with your clients back to the window. Windows are notorious for giving us reflections and light artifacts that obliterate chunks of iris. I've played with doing smartphone, and it's funny, I did some of my daughter, and I should have put those in here, did some of my daughter's eyes a few weeks ago as we were in our living room. Were we in our living room or were we outside? I don't remember where, but you can see there's a reflection in her eyes of the front of our house. We must have been outside or something goofy. And you can see a perfect reflection in her eye of our house, down to the color of our house, right? That's not helpful when I'm doing an iris analysis, just saying. You want to place your client if you're doing it indoors, and I suggest that you do it indoors. If you're going to try to do these photos outdoors, you need a cloudy day, not a sunny day. The sun is going to give you too much washout. So assuming you're living in a cold climate like I do, you're going to be doing most of your photos indoors. And assuming there's a light, a ceiling light in the room, you actually want that to be behind your client, not in front. Because again, the eye is moist, it's round. If the light is in front of them, it's going to throw reflections off the eyeball that are going to obliterate what you see. And so if you're doing it in a room, you want to make sure the room lighting is behind them. Get the camera as close to your client's face as possible. And again, we want lots of eye. We want the least amount of face as we can possibly have. You may want to additionally use your little medical pen light to illuminate specific areas. Now that's probably going to be require you to have another person in the room helping you, because when you think about it, I don't know what your smartphone is like, but mine, I have problems operating with two hands, let alone one. And I cannot take a picture with one hand with my smartphone. So if you set your light up, shine it where you want it to shine, and then get someone there and have them look and see exactly how you've got it. So what is it shining on in the eye? What is it illuminating that you want to see? Then have someone else hold that, and they might even need to anchor their fingers right on the person's face to keep them steady. Then you can come in with your camera and get the picture you want. So often it takes more than one person. The other thing to be aware of here is don't be afraid to take as many photos as you need. Move the pen light around, because as you move it around, you are going to find that different features become more visible. And that's a beautiful thing. You want to see, even if you've got to take 10 pictures of each eye, you want to see everything you can. And by moving the light around, you're going to see different features, different markings that pop. These are images done with an iriscope. They were sent to me by one of my students, and they're really fairly decent images overall. You're going to find various iterations of iriscopes on Amazon and eBay, and the prices range from a few hundred to nearly $1,000. I don't recommend that my students buy iriscopes, and for a couple of reasons. Number one, their resolution varies anything between 2 megapixels and 12 megapixels, with the most common being about 5. 5 megapixels is not a high enough resolution for you to expand the image to see things, right? So you really need a super high resolution. And using an iriscope, you're not going to get that kind of resolution, so you're going to lose definition, right? So that's an important thing to be aware of. Again, these yield fairly good images like the ones that you're seeing on your screen right now. And I want you to remember with this that we mentioned about moving the lights around, right? We talked about using the pen light and being able to move it. These iriscopes have fixed lighting, which means many of them have 4 lights, and they're absolutely fixed. You cannot change how those lights play. You can't turn 2 of them off, for instance. And what we know about frontal lighting is that we lose a lot of definition with frontal lighting. It's great for an overall assessment, but we lose definition. So case in point, I had a student who had learned iridology as a part of her naturopathic training, and she had a really nice camera, and it had 2 lights on it. She had been taught to always take pictures with both lights. She could turn one off at a time. And so through the course, through the class that I teach, I always will, show, okay, this is what it looks like with both lights on. And when we turn one off, look what happens when we turn the other one off and the first one back on. Look at what you see. And she couldn't understand why she was never seeing certain features in her clients' eyes. Like, all of her clients could not be that evenly predisposed, right? And so when she started playing with her camera and turning off one light, so she would do the first image with both lights, the next one with the right light, the next one with the left light, she started seeing things that she never noticed, that she couldn't see because of the way the lights were illuminated. When you're using an iriscope, this is the problem. You have to have all of that illumination, and it washes out certain features. That can be limiting. So the other thing that I found is that that I get my students to think about rather is, why would you spend a few hundred or even $1,000 on a piece of equipment that within 1 to 2 years you're going to be dissatisfied with? You're going to outgrow it. I would far rather you put that money into a little bank account or in a piggy bank on your desk or whatever. Every time you do an iris analysis using your handheld equipment, put $5 in that jar. And when you've got enough to start buying the professional grade equipment, which, and there's quite a price range on that as well, then buy it. But don't spend money on something that has no resale value, and don't spend money on something that you're going to outgrow really quickly, right? So important. Iridology cameras have some resale value. Iriscopes, I don't believe, do, because they have such limitations. So let's look at some very specific iridology camera setups. This is the one from John Miles. And gotta say, love John, love his service, love his equipment. He is amazing. I am still learning how to use this all the way. It's a little more technical than my other setup, but I love this just the same. Now, John Miles prefers the Nikon cameras, and he can customize his illuminators, and the illuminator is this piece with all of this coming up here. He can custom build that for just about any camera because I prefer Canons. So when I told him I had a Canon T6i, a Rebel T6i, he said no problem, and he told me what measurements he would need in order to customize the illuminator. Now, John has several different illuminators in his repertoire, and this is a mid-range one. This is not the least expensive one, and it's not the most expensive one, but it's the one that meets my needs. As you can see here, this is one fiber optic light, and this is another, and this is the focus light down here. And so what we've got here is the ability to shoot with both lights on, one light, or the other light. So we have lots of flexibility to actually make this work really well for us. So this uses a 100mm macro lens, and it is, you can use an autofocus lens, but you won't be using the autofocus feature if you're doing your handheld pictures. And I'll show you what it looks like when you're taking a picture with this handheld. I just set this up so that it is all the way over to where the settings are, to where we've got the shortest lens length possible. And I'm not a photographer, and I would have to look at my camera to tell you what that is. Here is what I love about this Miles Research illuminator. It does not go against the client's face. Now, some clients don't like anything touching their face. It doesn't matter how well you clean it or how safe it is, they don't want it touching their face. So this gives me that cushion because this is hangs out a little ways away from the face. Number two, this is really a great setup for doing pictures if your clientele is mostly young children or seniors. Young children or pets, if you do dogs and cats, this is brilliant. This setup, because it doesn't go against the face, allows you to have your client do this with their eyes. So if they have problems keeping their eyes open wide enough, and a lot of seniors have very droopy eyelids or weak eyelid muscles to where they actually cannot physically open their eyes wide anymore, this is brilliant because you can do this, get in really close, get your pictures, then you can have them let it go, let them blink, come in, do some more pictures, and you get really good iris shots. Best if you've got a windowless room, because this is a little ways away from the face. You can sometimes pick up reflections from the windows, and so you want to be aware of that as well. This is what it looks like when you're using this camera. So you can see that I'm a little ways away from my client's face, which makes it so easy. And so we don't even use, you can buy an optional chin rest for this and camera mount, but we find that just having the client lean on the table, support their face in their hands, and then I lean on the table as well to keep the camera steady, and then just move the camera in till I've got that crystal clear focus, and away we go. So that's beautiful because since we don't have to have all the fancy stands for it, it's a fairly portable unit. Get yourself a Pelican case, which John Miles also sells, and with a custom cut foam to keep it all nice and safe, and you are ready to go. This client clearly has some adrenal issues, and inherently so. And so you can see she is extremely mydriatic, extremely mydriatic. Now, like I said, I'm still learning refinements of using John Miles's setup. And as I look at this on the computer now, I realize that I should have actually probably increased my f-stop and probably maybe slowed down my shutter speed and maybe adjusted my ISO as well. But those are things that as I learn, I actually share with my students in my iridology course, in Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology, because some of my students buy the equipment that I talk about, right? So I support them as they do that. Beautiful setup nonetheless. I just need to get better at using it, and that's one of my goals for this next few weeks. This is the Iris Explorer from Iris Explorer 4 from Iris Labs, Matthew Dahmer. So this piece is what is the Iris Explorer. The rest of this is just a camera with a lens on it, okay? And so just like, let me just come back here. This is just the camera with a 100mm macro lens and the illuminator attached to that 100mm macro lens. So that's the Miles setup. The Iris Explorer from Matthew Dahmer. This is, for most of my students, a much better starting point for a couple of reasons. That doesn't mean it's better than, it just means it's easier to use than the John Miles setup. So this is, again, my Canon Rebel T6i and a 60mm macro lens. The IE4 actually comes with the extender tubes that you need to get the correct lens length here, okay? You do want this 60mm macro lens to be an autofocus, and so because you're going to use that a lot with this. Here's what I love about this setup. I love that it's a little bit more compact, right? That means it's easier to travel with. So I've custom designed a backpack that has foam insets so that I can just put this in that little backpack and away I go, which is very cool. This goes right up against the client's face, which means you block out all of the ambient light. You have no chance of getting any kind of reflections in your image that are from the room or from outside or from wherever. This setup is especially good if your clientele is pretty much between the ages of about 10 or 12 years old and 60 years old, because those typically are still, those people are still very capable of generally of keeping their eyes wide open. So it's not great for young children because they don't like things that they're going to be backing away and they don't like things against their face. Not great for seniors who have droopy eyelids because with that going right against the face, it's really hard to prop the eyelid open. And not great for animals either. I've tried doing pictures of my son's dogs and we did get one picture, but because you've got to get so close, it's just really a challenge. So we've got the two different setups that I use for two different reasons, and both of the lenses and illumination pieces fit the same camera, right? So I have one camera body and two lens light configurations. These are all compatible, to the best of my knowledge, with the Rebel T7i as well, which apparently has more features for those of you who like to geek out. So this is what it looks like when we're using it. You can see that this is right up against the client's face. right? This one I've had more practice with, so I understand how to switch my shutter speed and things like that to get the images that I want. And we use the autofocus a lot to find the best and most crisp focus possible. Quick and easy, lots of little fine-tuning things that you can do with this setup. And again, it's so compact, it's just really easy to use. Here is an example of the kind of pictures that come off this. So this is the same eye that we saw back here, right here. So you can see that this is a photography issue. This is my problem, not a Miles research problem. I didn't have enough illumination. His and my focus light has a little problem that we've since solved. And so I think if I had the focus light here, the pupil would be smaller. She is mydriatic anyways at the best of times, but keep that locked into your memory as we pop up to here. The IE4 has much more intense lighting, which means you will never ever see a mydriatic pupil this way. You'll have to assess mydriatic pupils just by room lighting. But look at the difference here. When we shoot from the front, nice and fairly smooth. When we turn one light off, now we start to see that we're casting shadows. And when we cast those shadows, we see that this client actually has contraction furrows that are not visible when we have the frontal lighting. And so this is why we want to be able to either move the light around, so your pen light, or be able to switch one light off and the other light off, is so that we can change how the light is hitting the eye, from what direction the light is hitting the eye, so that we can get some shadows being cast so that we can see texture. So throwing that light around also helps us to see things like pinguicula, right? And in the sclera. And so that's a really great thing too. It helps to highlight how big the pinguicula really is. So with the light, again, coming from the side, we see more texture, which is a really good thing because it means that we can do a more in-depth, more accurate analysis of the eye. So I am excited, woohoo, to share with you that registration is now open for Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology. The next course is starting Wednesday, January 15th. This course is taught by moi via 20 2-hour-long live webinars. They're held Wednesday nights, 5 till 7 p.m. Mountain Time. So Calgary, Alberta, put that into your time and date converter so you can figure out what time that is for you. Registration is now open. And until December 6th, there is a super early fast action tuition price, a very special price for people who are willing to commit right away. So iridology.education/priority is the website you want to go to. And at that website, you can get registered for the course. And as soon as you get registered, you will be welcomed into our Facebook group. You are invited to attend our office hours webinars as well, even though you haven't started the course. I find that a lot of people come to me already having a bit of knowledge, and so it's a nice way to ease them in, get them integrated into the group, and feeling like a part of the family. So the registration is now open. And again, until December 6th, there's very special pricing in place. Space is limited. I only take a maximum of 10 students per class because I want to make sure you get all the individual attention you need. When you go to iridology.education/priority, it's a sales page that will tell you everything you need to know about the class. And so hopefully that will answer your questions, but certainly if you have more questions, please reach out to me. My email is judith@cobblestonehealth.com. Thank you so much for being with me today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.